We don't want to be left behind. All we want to do is just blow your mind just one more time.
And you say New York City right about now.
What's up, family? Back again, bringing you more than what you bargained for. Read My Mind Radio, bringing you the baddest guests and topics we can find. I'm Thomas Reed, your host and producer of the podcast featuring compelling people impacted by all degrees of blindness and disability. Every now and then when I'm inspired, I bring you some of my own experiences as a man adjusting to becoming blind as an adult. Audio description is and will continue to be an ongoing topic on this podcast. It makes sense. We focus on those adjusting to blindness. Audio description, in my opinion, is a part of that process. It's access to information, entertainment, bonding with family and friends, and maybe even career opportunities. If you're new here, check out the link on this episode's blog post that has a page with all of the podcast episodes featuring audio description. Today, we're looking at the contributions of blind people in audio description. Let's get it. Read my mind. Read my mind.
I needed a job as a young guy, 17, 18 years old. I have many, as most blind people do, many grueling stories of discrimination. Just in telemarketing to sell the local newspaper in Los Angeles, and I don't mean the LA Times, and they hired me on the phone. But then when they told me to come to their office and they were giving me directions, they were vague. I said, well, would that be the second building from the corner? They said, well, don't worry about it. Just come down this street and you'll see the yellow sign. I said, well, I don't think my guide dog will notice the yellow sign. And they said, you're what? Wait a minute, put me on hold for 20 minutes, came on and made an excuse saying, oh, you know what? I didn't understand. My partner was also interviewing someone on the other line. We already filled the position. I'm Rick Boggs, professional audio engineer, and I'm responsible for making Pro Tools, the state-of-the-art audio recording software, accessible for blind audio engineers. I'm also a musician, playing multiple instruments, a composer and songwriter, something of an accomplished actor with many appearances on television and film between 1987 and 2007. For the last 20 years, I've been operating the company that I founded, Audio Eyes, and we produce audio description for film and television.
Rick came a long way from that 17-year-old young man in search of a job. Today, we're specifically exploring Rick's career within audio description. As he has been involved in the industry for over 20 years, we get a bit of a history lesson on the role blind people played in audio description. Rick's own introduction to audio description, from my understanding, illustrates how many people felt at that time.
When I first heard of audio description was when the American Foundation for the Blind was conducting their research and creating the booklet that eventually became Look Who's Watching, where they surveyed blind people and asked them, if we could add a voice to TV programs that would describe what was on the screen when no one was talking, would you like it? No, I feel very independent. I can watch TV and film all by myself. I don't need some voice telling me what's going on.
AFB's next step was to invite a group of those surveyed to watch a film.
I think it was a Forrest Gump film with Vin Scully doing the description.
The group was then resurveyed.
90% of the people who said no, like me, changed our mind and said, well, actually, this is really cool. And I didn't realize how much I was going to enjoy it. And no, I would like to have this. In 95 and 96, when WGBH, which is now Media Access Group, they were installing audio description systems into movie cinemas. They called me because I was very visible on television at the time. They figured I would be a good representative of blind people, and they asked me to find other blind people to come to these events. I helped recruit blind people to come to their installation celebrations, and then, of course, the media would come. I was interviewed talking about what the value of description was. I became a sort of volunteer promoter and the face of WGBH.
This was in addition to his actual career at that time.
From 1987 till 2002, I had a record label and recording studio. I built a recording studio from money I had earned as an actor. My desire to get into audio recording was driven by my passion as a songwriter. I wanted to be able to record and produce my own things, mostly because I couldn't really afford to go to a bunch of other studios and hire a bunch of musicians. So I wanted to be able to do it myself.
And he did. He produced bands and songwriters in his studio located on his residential property. Doing it yourself can present very specific challenges.
That led me down the path of the transition from analog audio to digital audio and exploring, okay, are blind people going to be completely left out as analog recording goes away? And I wanted to make sure, of course, that we weren't left out. That's a long and interesting story of how that ended up happening.
For now, we're focusing on another sort of accessibility.
Then moving forward to 2001, 2002, when my good friend Mike Hansel, who was at the time working for Caption Max, he came to visit me and my good friend Jack Patterson. And we were in the music studio and he was coming over to play drums and we were going to jam. And he said, Rick, I don't get it. How come you're out there promoting all this audio description stuff? You've got the studio and all the chops and as an engineer and all the equipment to produce it, but you're not producing any. I was just stunned and I sat there in silence. I never thought of that. I immediately said, let's look into that. Maybe that's not a bad thing to do.
Even today, when we discuss audio description, it's more than often from the perspective of a service for blind people. During my conversation with Rick, it was apparent to me that audio eyes should be viewed from a historical perspective. So let's go back to the beginning of audio description.
Well, this is one of my favorite topics. I am so proud to say that the United States of America has invented many, many, many things and holds many, many, many patents. And many of the things that we've created and invented benefit people with disabilities. But normally those things are created, invented, delivered by people that don't have that particular disability. Hey, we will help those who are less fortunate than ourselves kind of thing. What I'm proud to say about audio description is audio description was created by blind people, and every innovation and advancement in audio description that has really contributed to what it is now was made by blind people.
According to the History of Audio Description, written by Joel Snyder, the idea of audio description in its current form was first conceived in the 1960s by Chet Avery, who lost his sight at 17 years old. In 1981, Margaret Rockwell, a blind woman with a PhD in education, decided to pair the assisted listening devices with her future husband, Cody Fansteel, an expert in media and public relations. Fansteel read for the Washington Ear, the radio reading service founded by Rockwell.
Cody and Margaret, they're gone now, rest in peace, but they set the standards for how description should be done so that it's not condescending, so that you're not explaining the plot. And they trained some people.
One of those trained was Alan Woods, who continued training others in the Fansteel method.
In 1989, another blind person, wonderful guy that I know, Jim Stovall, created the Narrative Television Network, NTN. He set out to try to apply audio description to television programs. And in 1989, he worked, I believe, with WGBH, the TV station, to demonstrate how it would be done. And they used the SAP channel that was originally devised by Congress and the FCC to facilitate foreign language broadcasts. They demonstrated it successfully in 1989. Jim received an Emmy, actually, for technical achievement.
During the 1990s, the only television network broadcasting audio-described content was PBS.
Commercial TV wouldn't do it, no matter how much we pushed and advocated. They were resistant. In 2002, the FCC made a rule that commercial broadcasters would have to do 3.5 hours of primetime described programming on their networks. That's how I got my start, and some of the other companies got theirs.
Rick, familiar with recording technology, was already promoting audio description and learning the business. With his good friend Jack, Rick formed We See TV.
I was invited by my good friend Jolie Mason, who is a blind person that should receive a lot of more recognition than she ever has for what her contributions to audio description. She ensured that the Tournament of Roses parade every New Year's is audio described live on television for blind people, and has done so since the mid-90s at least, putting that on through her nonprofit, the Los Angeles Radio Reading Service. Well, she invited me to a meeting with Deborah Schuster.
Deborah Schuster did the captioning for ABC Television. She was approached about creating audio description for the network.
Deborah, having the integrity to realize that audio description was not her forte and she didn't know it, was going to go look for somebody who was good at it because she cares about providing good services in the industry. Unlike some people who work caption companies who just said, let's just throw something out there, call it description, and no one will know the difference because no one knows whether it's good or bad anyway, which we can get into at some point.
That meeting led to him describing for ABC Television. In 2007, Rick renamed the business.
Same company, same service, same people and everything, but it became Audio Eyes. We secured various clients, and now we're on as many as 9 broadcast networks, Amazon, iTunes, Netflix, large venues, and many corporations that produce corporate videos. The Fan Steels created it and trained sighted people to do it. Jim Stovall put it on television and GBH took it, but it became sighted people doing it without any input. Yet another important stage in the development of audio description was made by another wonderful professional blind person, Dr. Josh Mealy.
Longtime listeners should be familiar with the Smith-Kettlewell physicist, Dr. Josh Mealy. He's an alumni of the podcast and a member of the Read My Mind radio family. I'll link to his episode on this episode's blog post.
He has developed a lot of really cool adaptive stuff for blind people, but he was interested in description. He found that there was a grant available through the Department of Education, which he applied for, but he consulted me initially. Rick, I don't know the industry that well, the players that well. Give me the landscape, who's who, what's what. He did the impossible. He brought together all of the major providers of audio description services and created the Description Leadership Network under the Video Description Research and Development Center. The legacy is its website, vdrdc.org.
It served as a resource on audio description-related information and provides a communication platform where leaders in the field discuss topics like inclusion. As Josh, too, is a proponent for the inclusion of blind people in the audio description production process, he began an internship program.
Paid internships so that any description provider who was providing description for broadcast television or whatever could experiment with having a blind employee and not have to have a financial risk or whatever the time period was, 3 months, 6 months, and experience the value of having that person. The disappointing part of it was that really only one other vendor, besides myself, did it. I shouldn't say one, I think it's technically two. One of them absolutely did take on the intern as a staff member for whatever the period of time was. The other one simply contracted a blind person as a third party to review their work after it was already done. It's a little different to have a blind person critique your work when it's already out there on television, as opposed to give the blind person the opportunity to have input before it's finished.
As for the company taking on the blind intern, the feedback was positive, full of praises for the intern, and they admitted to it being a mutual learning experience.
Josh actually had the great courage and integrity to ask, well, then does that mean that going forward you would consider maybe employing a blind person in your process? And there was a long silence, and the person answered by saying, well, we think maybe it would be a great idea, since there's so much work going on the internet right now, that these blind experts could volunteer their time helping companies that are providing description on YouTube and other places on the network.
Wow. The
whole room kind of, ooh, maybe in an unintended way, it sounded very much like they were saying, we think that they should work for free.
Meanwhile, back at AudioWise,
our staff is now 30 people when it started with just 2 of us back in 2002. Our desire was to provide the best quality description out there. And we emulated WGBH, who was doing the best audio description. The only difference was we were going to be inclusive. We were going to make sure that performers with disabilities had opportunities to work in it, and that blind people in particular would always be included in the company. We would recruit, find, train blind people to work in production, and we've always done that.
You have 30 employees. Can you talk about how many of those are blind/disabled?
7 staff members that are totally blind. Actually, one guy might be qualified as low vision, but it's pretty low.
Rick was active as an advocate within the Screen Actors Guild, serving as an alternate board member and co-vice chair of the committee creating opportunities for actors with disabilities. This, and possibly those early experiences in the job market, helped form his early hiring policy.
I was very connected to a lot of disabled talent. For the first 2 years, I willingly practiced reverse discrimination. I would only cast voiceover artists with disabilities. I just felt like there was so much discrimination within the industry. We're never giving people with disabilities an opportunity, that I wanted to make my statement, and I posted about it on the internet. And I naively thought that it would make other companies feel the pressure and that they would start hiring people with disabilities too, but it didn't work.
Now, looking towards the future and how we improve audio description.
Making sure that blind people had a voice. What's good? What's bad? What are the standards? What should it be? I was eventually invited to edit and rewrite a lot of sections of the style guide for one of the major streaming services, the big dog in the industry. To their credit, they recognize, hey, this guy's the expert. He's the professional. Let us take his notes on what our style guide should be about what description should be.
You mentioned that this was your favorite topic. What's the importance of the topic? Why do you think it's important that people are aware of that history?
I think it's really important that people understand that audio description was created by blind people for blind people, because I want the industry to be accountable to the consumer. I want the industry not to be like many services for people with disabilities, which are well-intending, but also have unintended patronizing elements to the services they provide. In other words, making people feel less than, less powerful, helpless, creating a dual class system, sort of treating the people you're helping like they're not really equal to yourself.
Audio description is not a charitable venture. It's commercial. The need for inclusion is therefore even more relevant, in my opinion. Making sure not to leak any revealing information. Rick shared a recent experience. One of his audio description clients received some complaints about description from the general public.
What's with this annoying voice, and why do you have to put that in here? We don't like this, and how can we get rid of it? They decided to address it in the TV program itself, which I thought was a unique decision. The comment wasn't very flattering of description itself. It offended some of my staff members that are blind. To the customer's credit, when we notified them and said, this is offensive, they decided to change it. And kudos to that organization that was willing to do that and show some sensitivity to their patrons and actually care, about the feelings of the blind consumers.
What are some of the other hurdles that seem to be in the way of getting, quote unquote, in the way of blind people being involved on the production side of audio description?
One barrier that we have is that blind people are not loud and vocal about wanting good service. Blind people are all too often grateful to have anything. In recent online forums,
I'll include links to these forums on readmymind.com. They include the Audio Description Discussion Facebook group and the ACB Audio Description Project listserv.
A lot of blind people and describers are on there. Unbeknownst to the members of that group, there are actually a whole lot of network executives and TV people that watch that group that sort of lurk there. Someone was complaining because the description was on a particular series or program was very poor. They told us stuff we already know. They didn't tell us stuff we wanted to know. They, blah, blah, blah. And I love it when blind people would get up and go, hey, man, if you're going to describe it for me, do a good job. Otherwise, I'll turn off the description and listen like I used to. So the discussion was very fruitful. It was very constructive. But then some blind person inevitably comes on and says, guys, I don't understand why we have to be complaining about the description that we're getting. Can't you remember the days when we didn't have anything at all? I mean, can't we just be grateful that these people are providing something? That is the most destructive thing that blind people can possibly do.
I have a feeling this attitude exists in any marginalized group. Perpetuating the idea that blind people should just be happy with what they get implies that they don't deserve quality.
I have been told by one of my customers, and a major customer at that, Rick, we'd be happy to even pay increased rates for this stuff if we could verify that what you're saying about the quality of your service is actually true. Basically, they said, if you could point us online to anywhere where blind people are saying, this is what makes good description, and it lines up with the kind of services you provide, Rick, well then, yeah, we're not going to grind you on the price as much as we do because we want to pay for the best service there is.
At the end of the day, are these really just excuses based on what they already believe to be true?
The public perception of blindness and blind people is really inaccurate and really flawed and really is the greatest barrier to inclusion of blind people in anything at all. Social services, employment of any kind, from my perspective in particular, in inclusion in audio description production.
Misperceptions that ultimately question the abilities of blind people. Assumptions that lead people to think that it's amazing that a blind person can do even the most basic things that have nothing to do with seeing. Like brushing their teeth, getting dressed.
People trying to drag them across the street or talking loudly because they can't see, or all these stereotypical things that do happen to all of us. Mm-hmm. Those same misperceptions are the same barriers within the entertainment industry that prevent production companies, captioning companies, localization companies, post-production companies from thinking about blind people and considering employing blind people in their operations. And I have story after story after story. I have so much inside perspective.
The type of stories based on real experience that can provide insight into the industry that we as consumers may otherwise never know.
It really is far and away public attitudes toward blindness and blind people. That's why I became affiliated with the National Federation of the Blind. I've always sort of walked the fence between that and the American Council of the Blind and been a member of both, participated in both. I appreciate the American Council of the Blind's advocacy. It was their advocacy really that led to the FCC ruling in the first place in 2002 to make description mandated for commercial television. They really deserve the credit for that. What I'm about to say might sound like sour grapes, but it really isn't.
The difference between organizations, as Rick sees it, conflicts with his own philosophy of employing blind people. It stems from the initial development of ACB's audio description project,
committing themselves to ongoing advocacy and promotion of audio description. They did not include a plank that would strongly advocate for inclusion from an employment perspective. I felt that they should have consulted me because I had already been employing blind people in this field for 8 years. They knew very well of what I was doing. And yet when they created this initiative, they didn't even call me to say, hey, do you have any thoughts on this or that or the other thing? As a result, I think, in my opinion, they failed to include the professional opportunities and the importance of inclusion in the process in their initial manifesto on audio description.
While he appreciates both organizations, for Rick, the difference between the two is clear. The National Federation of the Blind,
in my view, walks the walk. When they need a lawyer, they hire a blind lawyer. When they need a travel agent, they look for a blind travel agent.
The two teamed up and Rick and his colleagues offered a training.
It was a 50-week intensive training program to train 10 blind people to become certified description quality specialists.
The NFB's support not only enabled Rick to provide this training, but also helped lead to opportunities for those trained.
We found that we've definitely had a like mind. I would like to have the legacy that providers of audio description automatically seek to include blind professionals in their operations. We're really far from that now. Nobody does that, but that is my goal. I eventually want to return to producing music and get out of audio description, but I would really like to establish that first.
As far as finding ways we can help, Rick suggests that those with a platform, podcasters, YouTubers, bloggers, no matter what your topic is, find a way to include discussions about audio description.
Get people talking about it, whether they're blind or not. Kind of introduce people to it that don't already know it.
And from the consumer point of view, well, let's share our comments, good or bad.
And they need to get those comments directly to anybody and everybody. In other words, you tell the network, you write to the show and to the description company that did it, and then publicly on social media, on your Facebook timeline, on your Twitter account. Hey, saw a great audio description, and name where it was and when it was. And you could give why. I love the voice that they chose, or they had a horrible voice, or I could hardly hear the movie. The description was so loud. Whatever it is, be vocal about these things.
If you want to be vocal about Rick, well, he's on social media.
Boggs blogs on Twitter, Boggs, Boggs. Facebook, Rick Boggs.
You can find links to his social and more by visiting audioeyes.com. Remember, that's plural.
AudioEyes, audioeyes.com.
Or
give us a ring, 818-671-6190. We'll take your phone calls. So we'll talk to people, sighted people, blind people, people that are interested in, voiceover artists. I take demos over the internet all the time. Any blind person interested in getting involved in this kind of stuff, I'm the only way in right now. We're pretty busy, but I do get to everybody eventually if you're patient and persistent. And I thank everybody, really. If you've listened this long, thank you so much for your interest in the whole topic, really.
Shout out to Rick Boggs. I enjoyed this conversation. Audio description, as you hopefully realize, is about so much more than entertainment. It's adoption. The level of commitment given by entertainment producers and broadcasters is a reflection of how blind people are perceived in society. Scripts, censoring on-screen scenes or talking down to the viewer, expecting quality control work for free, overlooking the contributions and minimizing input from blind people. That, to me, sounds like a statement about how much blind people are valued. As audio description evolves, it becomes more important to understand and ensure its original purpose is maintained. All the more reason for more blind people to be involved in its development. I personally suggest audio description to those who are not blind. However, I would not want to see audio description move away from censoring blind people and possibly becoming less about making the visual accessible. How do you feel about audio description? Do you like this sort of dive into topics? Let me know. readmymindradio@gmail.com or leave me a voicemail at 570-798-7343. If you like what you heard today, tell a friend to check out Read My Mind Radio. It's available wherever you get podcasts. Transcripts, resources, and more are over at readmymind.com. And yes, That's R to the E, I.
D, and that's me in a place to be.
Like my last name. Peace.